The day I told my son I lost my job, he looked me in the eyes and kicked me out of his house. But what he didn't know, I had $2 million in my bank account. My name is Margaret Reynolds, and I'm 67 years old. I raised my only son, Daniel, with everything I had, every ounce of love, every dollar I could earn, every sleepless night, every dream I quietly folded away just to make sure his would come true. I never asked for much in return. Just love, just kindness, just to be remembered. It was a Tuesday when I told him. Late afternoon, quiet sun hanging over the porch. I remember I had made meatloaf, his favorite as a child. Not that he noticed anymore. He barely looked up from his phone. "Danny, I need to talk to you," I had said gently. My voice shook just a bit, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion. I could still do my gardening and laundry and even babysit little Sophie, his daughter. But the kind of tired that settles deep in your soul after years of pretending you're okay. He sighed. That familiar, cold, impatient sigh. "If it's about money, Mom." "No," I cut in softly. "I just wanted you to know I lost my job last month." He looked up then, brows furrowed, eyes wide. I wasn't expecting him to jump up and hug me, or cry, or even offer a kind word. But what came out of his mouth wasn't even in the realm of what I thought possible. "So what do you want me to do about it?" he asked, frowning like I had spilled something on his nice carpet. I blinked. "Nothing, sweetheart. I just thought you should know. I've been staying quiet about it, but—" "Mom," he interrupted, standing now, towering over me. "I can't do this. I've got a family to think about. Expenses, stress. And now you're telling me you're jobless? Do you expect to live here forever?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, I realized I didn't recognize the boy I raised. There was no warmth in his eyes, no empathy, just irritation. Cold, heavy silence filled the room. "I didn't say that," I replied quietly. "I was just trying to be honest with you." He rubbed his face like he was dealing with something unbearable. "I think it's time you made some other arrangements." I sat there frozen. My hands rested on the hem of my worn-out sweater. My heart beat slowly, but painfully. "You want me to leave?" He nodded. No apology, no hesitation. "I have a guest room for a reason," he continued, "but I never said it was permanent. You're almost 70, Mom. It's time you figured things out for yourself." His wife, Claire, didn't say a word. She stood by the kitchen doorway, arms folded, lips tight. I always thought we had a quiet understanding. Maybe I was wrong. Or maybe she had grown tired of me too. That night I packed. I didn't cry, not until I was alone in the cab, my suitcase beside me and a cheap plastic bag of leftover meatloaf on my lap. The driver didn't say much, just asked me where to. I gave him the address of a small motel on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. I'd stayed there once years ago during a work trip when I couldn't afford the nicer hotels. The sheets smelled like bleach, but the people were kind. Lying in that room with the blinking neon light outside the window, I stared at the ceiling. I wasn't homeless, not in the way he thought, and I wasn't broken, just bruised, quietly, deeply. What Daniel didn't know, what no one in my life knew, was that for the past 20 years, I had worked as a private financial assistant for a very wealthy widow named Helen Goldstein. A quiet woman, sharp as a whip even in her 80s. She owned multiple properties and rarely trusted banks. She trusted me instead. I helped her manage everything, taxes, investments, even her wills and trusts. When Helen passed away 2 years ago, she left me everything, all of it. I was stunned, shaken, even tried to refuse. But her will was ironclad, and she had no children. Her family, distant cousins, barely visited. She once said to me, "You're the daughter I never had. Take care of yourself the way you always took care of me." And I did. Quietly. I kept working, even though I didn't need to anymore. I lived modestly, wore the same old shoes, ate at diners, gave money to shelters in cash without leaving my name. I didn't tell Daniel because I didn't want him to see me as a dollar sign. I wanted him to love me for me. But now, I wasn't so sure he ever did. I stayed in that motel for a week. Then I found a small cottage on the outskirts of the next town. Quiet, surrounded by trees. A little garden out front where I planted my mother's favorite roses. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't answer when he finally messaged, 2 weeks later, asking if I had figured out a place to stay. I stared at the screen. No, "How are you?" No apology. Just a cold, dry sentence. And still, part of me wanted to reply, to say yes, to tell him I was okay, that his mother, the one who gave up everything for him, had landed on her feet. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Because something had changed in me that day on his porch. Something deep and irreversible. And as the leaves began to fall that October, I knew my story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The mornings in the cottage were quiet. Peaceful even. A soft kind of silence that pressed gently against your chest instead of squeezing it. I'd wake up to the sound of birds and the rustle of leaves outside the window. The air smelled of pine and fresh dirt. It was the kind of calm I hadn't known in years, maybe decades. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't have to rush. I'd sit by the little kitchen window with my cup of tea, watching the sun creep over the trees. The place wasn't fancy. Just 2 small bedrooms, an old stove that took forever to heat up, and a porch swing with a rusty chain. But it was mine. Bought in full, no mortgage, no landlord. Just me and the keys in my pocket. I spent those early days cleaning, scrubbing every corner like it would wash away the ache in my chest. And at night, I'd sit on the porch, wrapped in my mother's knitted shawl, staring at the stars. Sometimes I'd talk to Helen, out loud. I didn't care how it looked. She had become my only real friend in the last stretch of life. Losing her had been quiet. No funeral, no big send-off. Just her ashes and a will that changed my life. I hadn't told anyone about the money. Not Daniel. Not the neighbors. Not even the local bank manager who tried to talk me into a senior-friendly savings plan. I smiled politely and declined. I kept my funds in a private account under the same firm that Helen had used, discreet, secure, and far from prying eyes. One day, as I was watering the little rose bushes, my phone rang. I recognized the number. Daniel. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I almost let it ring out. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I said, keeping my voice even. "Mom." His tone was stiff. Not warm, not angry, just stiff. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied. "Thank you for asking." A pause. "Where are you staying?" "I found a place." Another pause. Longer this time. "Well, that's good," he said finally. "Claire's been worried." I almost laughed. Claire? Worried? She hadn't even looked me in the eye the night I left. "I appreciate the concern," I said simply, "but I'm doing just fine." "I didn't mean for it to go the way it did," he mumbled. "I was under a lot of stress." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "We all have stress, Daniel, but we choose how we treat people." There was silence on the other end, heavy. Maybe he was thinking, maybe not. I just thought, if you needed help, you could have said something, he added. I could feel something shift inside me, a quiet anger. Not the kind that shouts or slams doors, but the kind that sits in your bones for years. I did say something, I replied. You just didn't want to hear it. He didn't respond. I have to go, I said softly. I'm expecting a neighbor soon. We're planting tulips. He mumbled a goodbye and hung up. I stared at the phone for a long moment after. My hands were shaking, just slightly. The neighbor I mentioned, Mrs. Jean, did come by that afternoon. A widow in her 70s with a warm laugh and bright scarves. She brought lemon muffins and stories about her grandkids. You remind me of someone, she said, sipping her tea. Tough on the outside, but you've got soft eyes. I smiled. Maybe I've just learned how to survive. That evening, as I swept the porch, a thought came over me, heavy, yet freeing. I didn't owe Daniel an explanation. Not anymore. But still, I couldn't help but wonder what he'd say, what his face would look like, if he ever found out about the money, about Helen, about the woman he turned away who had more in her account than he'd ever know what to do with. But I didn't want revenge. Not really. I wanted peace, maybe a little justice, but mostly I wanted to feel like I mattered again, like I wasn't just a burden with old bones and fading memories. The following week, I started volunteering at the town library. Quiet work, organizing shelves, helping kids with reading. It felt good, purposeful. People smiled at me there, real smiles, not the forced kind you give out of obligation. One afternoon, a little girl named Lily hugged me around the waist and whispered, "You smell like cookies." I laughed so hard I almost cried. Days passed gently. I baked. I read. I breathed. The ache began to dull, replaced by something else, something calm and rooted. But then, something happened. It was a cold morning in late November when I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in ink. Inside was a single line. You think you've disappeared, but not everyone forgets what you're worth. No signature, no clue who sent it. My heart pounded as I read it over and over. The handwriting looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I stood there in the kitchen, clutching that slip of paper, knowing deep in my gut that my quiet life wasn't going to stay quiet for long. The letter stayed on my nightstand for days. Every time I passed it, I'd glance at it, hoping something new would appear, an extra word, a clue, a name. But it never changed. Just that single, strange sentence in familiar handwriting. You think you've disappeared, but not everyone forgets what you're worth. It lingered in my mind like a scent that won't leave the room. I couldn't explain it, but something about it rattled me. It wasn't a threat, not directly, but it wasn't exactly kind either. It felt watchful, like someone out there knew something they shouldn't. I started locking my doors earlier in the evening, checking the windows twice before bed. The peace I'd built in this little corner of the world began to feel thin, like tissue paper in the rain. One evening, I took the letter to Jean. She looked it over with her reading glasses, pressing her lips together as she read. Then she handed it back to me, calm as ever. Could be a prank, she said, though her tone lacked conviction. Or someone from your past trying to stir up dust. My past doesn't have many people left in it, I replied. And the ones who are, they're not the letter-writing type. Jean gave me that look, the one older women give each other when words aren't needed, the kind that says, we've seen enough life to know better. Do you want me to stay the night? She offered. I smiled. No, I'll be fine. It's probably nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a pebble tossed into still water. Something was starting to ripple, and I didn't know where it would lead. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking back to Helen, her sudden illness, the short time between diagnosis and death, and how, out of nowhere, she'd decided to leave everything to me. We weren't even related by blood, just friends from church. She had nieces and nephews she barely spoke to, but I never expected her to write me into her will, let alone as her sole heir. There had been some grumbling from her family after she passed. I heard whispers, a few side glances at the memorial service, but no one confronted me, not directly. Until now. I started going through the boxes Helen left me, things I hadn't looked at since I moved into the cottage. One evening, I found a small locked diary tucked inside a quilted pouch, the kind of thing young girls use to hide under their pillows. It took me 3 days to find the key, taped beneath a false bottom in one of her jewelry boxes. Inside the diary were years of entries, some short, some long. But as I flipped through the pages, one name kept appearing: Peter. She wrote about him with affection and guilt, a name I'd never heard her mention aloud. He asked again about the money. One entry read, "I told him no. It's not for him to touch." Another, "I worry he'll come around again. I don't trust his calm voice. He's always wanted control. He's not getting it from me." The more I read, the more uneasy I felt. Whoever Peter was, he clearly didn't take kindly to being cut off. And then, on a page dated 2 months before her passing, "If anything happens to me, I need someone to know it wasn't nature. It wasn't time. He's watching. He's angry. I'm scared." I felt the blood drain from my face. I closed the diary and sat there in the lamplight, holding it against my chest. Could it be? Had Helen been? It was too much. I was spiraling. Maybe she was just paranoid. She had always been dramatic, writing poetry in the margins of her calendars, crying during supermarket commercials. But still, who was Peter? And could he be the one behind the letter? The next morning, I took the diary to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Dawson was a slow-moving man with kind eyes and a coffee cup that said, "Retired but still here." He listened carefully, read a few entries, then rubbed his chin. "I remember Helen," he said. "Sweet lady, quiet. Didn't have much trouble around her." "She was scared," I whispered. "I didn't see it. I didn't ask." "Well, I can look into it," he said. "But unless we have proof of foul play, I can't dig too deep." "I'm not asking for a case file," I said. "Just, if the name Peter ever comes up, let me know." He nodded slowly. "You watch yourself, okay? This place may be peaceful, but even peaceful places have shadows." I walked out of the station feeling heavier than when I went in. My safe little world was cracking, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend everything was okay. That afternoon, as I was walking back from the grocery store, I noticed a car parked across the street from my cottage. A black sedan, clean, windows tinted too dark for a small town like ours. It wasn't there yesterday, and it wasn't there by the time the sun went down. I didn't tell Jean. I didn't tell anyone. But that night, I slept with the lights on, because suddenly the silence around me didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like someone was waiting. I stopped going on my morning walks. Every time I passed that corner where the black sedan had been parked, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I couldn't explain why. No one had approached me. No one had spoken to me. But something deep in my bones told me this wasn't a coincidence. For the first time in years, I felt like a visitor in my own life. I still cooked breakfast every morning, still cleaned the kitchen, watered the garden, checked the mail. But I was doing everything with one ear tuned to every creak in the floorboards, every rustle in the wind. When the phone rang, I jumped. When a knock came at the door, my heart thudded in my chest. I told myself to breathe, that it was probably nothing, that maybe I was letting my imagination get the best of me. But I've lived long enough to know, women our age, we don't imagine these things. We feel them. And feelings, especially the uneasy ones, don't just come from nowhere. I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I booked a train ticket to the city. I needed answers. About Peter, about Helen's past, about who might want to scare me now, months after her passing. The train ride was quiet. I watched the fields blur into buildings. By the time I stepped off the platform and into the noise and motion of downtown, I felt like a ghost. The city hadn't changed much, still bustling, still impatient. But I had. I moved slower now, noticed more. I had only one address, a return address I found inside one of Helen's old envelopes tucked in the back of her diary. I took a taxi to a small apartment building on the edge of the old district. It took a long time for anyone to answer the door. When it finally opened, an older woman with thinning hair and cautious eyes peered out. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for information about someone named Peter," I said. "He was close to Helen Marks." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Are you the lady from the will?" I didn't respond right away. She didn't wait. I figured. He's been furious ever since. Said that old witch tricked him. Said it should have been his. All of it. "Is he here?" She scoffed. "He left months ago. Said he had something to settle. But he still calls. Sends letters. Angry ones. Said he's keeping an eye on you." My heart dropped. "He sent me a letter," I whispered. "No name. Just a message. Watching. Remembering." She nodded slowly. "That sounds like him." "Why?" I asked. "Why me?" "I didn't ask for any of it. He thinks you knew. That Helen trusted you more. He was her nephew, you know. Only blood left." I swallowed hard. Then why didn't she leave it to him? The woman gave me a long look. Because he made her afraid. He wanted her money, not her company. Never once cared for her when she got sick. You did. I left with more weight in my chest than when I arrived. So it was true. Someone was watching. And it wasn't random. Back home, I tried to settle into my routine again. But something had shifted. That same week, I found my garden gate open one morning. I always locked it. The kitchen window cracked open slightly, and I hadn't opened it in days. I called Sheriff Dawson again. He came over, took a look, listened quietly as I told him everything. "This Peter, he's unwell," I said. "I don't know what he wants from me, but I think it's going to get worse." Sheriff Dawson nodded. "I'll ask around, and I'll drive by every night, just in case." That gave me a little peace, for about 2 days. Then came the night I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard in years. A voice, outside my window, low, hoarse, talking to no one, or maybe to me. "You think you're safe? You think hiding in a dead woman's house makes you better than me?" I froze in bed. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would give out. I reached for the lamp, then stopped. Light would only show I was awake. The voice went on. "She owed me. She promised. And you just took it." Then silence. By the time I found the courage to peek out the window, the street was empty. Just a breeze rustling the trees. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in the armchair by the door, holding my phone, clutching Helen's diary like it was a shield. The next morning, I called Jean. "I think he's here," I told her. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. She came over within the hour, holding a thermos of coffee and a worn Bible. "He's not going to scare you out of your home," she said firmly. "We've been through worse." I nodded, trying to believe her, but I wasn't sure anymore, because deep down, I could feel it. This wasn't just about money or anger. This was personal. And Peter, he was just getting started. The morning light felt different, distant somehow, like the sun itself knew what was coming. I woke up early, pulled on my coat, and walked to the door, pausing as I touched the handle. Everything felt too still, too quiet. The house was holding its breath. Jean had stayed with me the night before, sleeping on the couch in the living room, but I knew I couldn't keep hiding. I was tired of being afraid, tired of waiting for the inevitable. I grabbed Helen's diary, slipped it into my bag, and stepped outside. Sheriff Dawson had promised to keep an eye on things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that no one could stop what was coming. I felt that familiar pull again, the need to figure this out, to confront it. I walked to the edge of town, towards the old building where I knew Peter had once lived. It was in a part of town that had seen better days. Vacant storefronts, peeling paint, the hum of electricity always slightly off-key. The building was quiet now, but it felt alive with ghosts. And I felt it too, like I wasn't just walking towards Peter, but towards something much deeper. Something tied to Helen. Something tied to me. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly. The apartment was dark, the air stale. There were signs of a life lived there, papers scattered, dishes in the sink, a faint smell of something that wasn't quite food. But it was the stack of letters on the counter that caught my eye. All addressed to me, all with the same messy handwriting. And at the top, a single line: "You can't run from what you've taken." I picked up the letters and walked through the apartment, heading toward the back room where I knew I would find what I was looking for. Peter didn't hear me approach. He was sitting by the window, looking out over the street. He hadn't changed much since the last time I saw him. Still scruffy, still the same haunted eyes that had stared back at me all those years ago. But there was a hardness to him now, a coldness. "You think it's all yours, don't you?" he said, without turning around. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it in days. "Helen didn't deserve it. She was a fool, trusting you. You didn't even ask for it, and now you've stolen it all." I stood still, clutching the letters in my hands. "It's not mine to keep. I never wanted it. It wasn't supposed to be this way." Peter laughed, but there was no joy in it. "You think you're innocent? You think because you've hidden away in that little cottage, pretending it's all peaceful, that no one notices? That no one cares?" "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice shaking, but I stood my ground. "You weren't there for her. You didn't take care of her when she needed you. She chose me, and that's what you can't accept." Peter's eyes turned cold, and for a moment I thought he might lash out. But instead, he stood up and walked toward me slowly, his eyes scanning the room as if looking for something, anything, to make his point. "She trusted you," he muttered. "She thought you could handle it. Handle everything." I nodded, the weight of it all pressing down on me. "I'm doing the best I can, Peter. But that's what scares you, isn't it? I'm still here. I'm still standing." For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the silence thick with years of resentment and unspoken words. Finally, Peter sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Do what you want with it," he said, his voice suddenly small. "But know this. I was the one who was supposed to have it, not you." He turned, walked to the door, and left without another word. I stood there for what felt like hours. The weight of everything that had happened, all the hidden tension, all the unsaid things, suddenly seemed to dissipate. Peter wasn't my problem anymore. I wasn't running anymore. I walked back home, the weight of the letters finally lifting from my chest. The black sedan? Gone. The strange feeling of being watched? Faded. Helen's legacy was mine to carry, and I would carry it. Not out of guilt or fear, but because it was right. It was hers to give, and she chose me. Maybe that's all I needed to remember. I stepped into my house, locked the door behind me, and finally allowed myself to breathe. And so, here I am, telling you my story. A story about fear, about trust, and about standing up for what's yours. Life has a way of throwing us off course, of making us feel small, but we're stronger than we realize. Sometimes, the most important thing we can do is keep standing, keep walking. If you liked this story, subscribe to this channel for more. Life's twists and turns aren't always what we expect, but the power to change is always in our hands.